And these values will govern every aspect of our life. It's how we filter the world around us. We literally skew our experience of the world through the lens of our values. And our values will also dictate how we spend our resources, primary resources being time, energy, and money. And however we invest our resources will also ultimately become our destiny.
Welcome to A Founder's Life, and I am your host, Leo Gestetner. My guests on my shelf share our entrepreneurial journey and our methods for a balanced life. I'm joined here today by Keala Kanae. Keala, thank you for joining us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you very much, Leo, for having me on the podcast. It's an honor to be here. And for a moment before I introduce myself, I do want to encourage your listeners to drop your review on whatever platform that they're on. I don't know if people realize how much work goes into a podcast, and you're obviously investing a lot of time in that. So I just want to encourage them to drop you a review, just because it really supports the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I've listened to several episodes, so I get that it's a lot of work. I've secretly wanted to have a podcast for a couple of years. It's just so much work. So anyhow, so thank you so much for having me. I'm currently the founder and CEO of Inspirian. And so we work with entrepreneurs or high achievers, basically the people that have big goals, big dreams, big aspirations. They've usually done some personal development work. They've done some work on themselves, and yet maybe they still find themselves struggling with procrastination, imposter syndrome, self-doubt. Ultimately, they feel like they know that they're capable of achieving more, but they're just not quite reaching that achievement, and they're looking for that next edge, that next breakthrough that's going to pull that extra layer of performance out of them. But we use a combination of neuroscience, psychology, and what we ultimately call integrative neural conditioning to make that happen for them, and we 100% guarantee our results. I started out a few years ago, a little over a decade ago, working in a coffee shop for minimum wage. Learned some of the stuff that we do now in my company. I took that, built I initially got into affiliate marketing that kind of organically turned into a coaching program for affiliate marketing. It wasn't planning to go in that direction. It just kind of unfolded that way. We did about 140 million in that company. We scaled that from 0 to 20 million our first year. And then I exited that company last year in 2024 so that I could focus on what we do now, working with entrepreneurs to help them get those breakthroughs that they need to, reap that full performance from themselves. So that's just a little bit about me.
Well, thank you. Love the journey on what you're doing now. So talk to us about how you got to where you are.
What do you mean exactly? Clarify for me.
So, you talked about, where you started, but in between that, did you work for anyone else? Anything else you've done in the middle there? What else sort of brought you to where you are? Or has it been a much shorter career that you just talked about?
I did the college thing, got the degree, got a bachelor's degree in psychology, was initially in love with with psychology, but also knew that I didn't want to be like a therapist my whole life or anything like that. So eventually I left college, went to, ended up in the workforce, found myself working for minimum wage in a coffee shop, living in my mom's spare bedroom with a 500 credit score. And in 2010, I came home from a barbecue with some friends, and there was a stack of photographs on the bed. And I was living with some roommates at the time. And I remember walking in the door and going what is that? So I walked up to this stack of photographs. I picked it up, and it was about a dozen photographs or so, and they were all torn in half. And I'm sifting through these photos going what happened here? And then at the bottom was a little note from my girlfriend at the time. We had been together for 4.5 years, and there's a little note that said, "Picture me out of your life." And I was like, man, that is a savage way to break up with somebody after 4.5 years together. Well, fast forward a couple of weeks from there, and I had moved out of my bedroom, or moved out of that house with my roommates. I couldn't afford the rent, ultimately, is what happened. I moved back in with my mom, and she's not answering my phone calls. She's not answering my text messages. It's been a couple of weeks. I really thought this would maybe this was a moment of anger, and we're going to sort this out. And I'm pacing up and down the hallway in my mom's house, and I have this moment where, I ask myself this life-changing question. I was kind of taking inventory about everything in my life where I was unhappy, unsatisfied, not getting the results I wanted. And it clicked. And I asked myself, well, what if it's me? What if it's not my coworkers, the economy, my, my upline, my sponsor, my this, my that, like all these different things that I had tried. What if it's me? And that was this moment where I was like, well, if it's me, then that's great because I can do something about me. And that day, like within minutes of that, asking myself that question, I called a buddy of mine and I was like, hey, there's this class that you've been telling me a lot about, personal development class. Here's what I'm going through right now. Do you think that this is something that would be helpful for me? And he's like, man, I'm just excited for the road that you're about to go down. And so 2 weeks later, I found myself in a live seminar. It wasn't like a motivational seminar. It was very much holding up a mirror to yourself for 3 days straight and like really reviewing how I'm showing up in my life in every area. And that was the wake up call that I needed. And over the next couple of years, I became fascinated. Well, really over the next 15 years, I became fascinated with philosophy, axiology, teleology, ontology, neuroscience. I dove deeper into psychology, and I really want to understand some of the laws and principles of success, laws and principles of the universe, and really how our brain works and how we create change by changing our brain. And initially, I thought I'd be a life coach. Actually, Leo, is the truth of it. I thought I would be a life coach. I was so inspired by the stuff that I was learning. I was like, I'll just coach people on how to like change their lives. Well, it turns out, Leo, nobody wants to be coached by a guy who's broke, living in his mom's spare bedroom, and has a 500 credit score. So I said, well, maybe if I go get success, then people will care about my message. And, more realistically, what that meant is I turned my life into my message. So I applied that to affiliate marketing, had monumental success there, quickly climbed ranks, was on leaderboards, was speaking on stages at events. That turned into people sending me emails, asking me questions, teach me how to do this, teach me how to do that. And it just kind of slowly, organically turned into a coaching business. Initially I was dropping courses. This is in 2015. So this is before everybody and their brother was like a coach and making courses and whatnot. So we were kind of helping to pioneer the space a little bit. And then in 2016, it turned into a coaching business, and we scaled that from $0 to $1 million a month in 4 months. Did just a little shy, actually, of $20 million our first year. Went from 0 to 60 employees. It was a lot. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that level of insanity. And then I just kept doing that for the last 8 years or so and exited the company last year. And in all of that, though, my primary so most of what I'm known for online these days is marketing, sales, direct response, advertising, traffic, these sorts of things, funnels. But the reality is, like, my first love has still always been the brain science, the philosophy, trying to understand the universe and how we operate in it and how we reach our peak performance and pull more out of ourselves each day. And so that's where I am. That's where I get to spend all of my time now. And I have, as we were talking about just before this kicked off, I've some people bet the farm on their business. I bet the ranch, literally. I have a ranch that we're moving to, but I've bet everything that I have on this next venture. And I'm really excited about it because I get to do the work that I find most meaningful in my life.
Love that. You can't ask for something better than that. And I think it's interesting, you started off by talking about how, you're blaming everyone else, which for you at the time was your girlfriend, until you look inside. And I think that's so true in so many different ways people do that. I mean, I see it in the workplace all the time. People are like, wow, it's this person's fault, or it's the work, or it's the, and I've often said to people, well, I bet if you look at the same issues you're having at work, I guarantee you're having those same issues in your personal life. You may not notice them, but the same patterns repeat themselves. Whether it's us blaming the world or whatever it is, the same patterns repeat throughout our lives. So at some point you need to address them. At some point you need to look at yourself and work out what you want to change. And that doesn't have to be a fundamental change, but
Absolutely.
Step changes is what makes a difference and helps you move forward in life.
Absolutely. With my leadership team, we have and this is a spoken, shared philosophy. It's not like an unspoken rule. I talk with them about this a lot. Probably them, but definitely me. So when we have an issue going on inside of the organization, or especially an interpersonal issue, my first thing with them is, well, how are you creating that? So because I want to encourage them to look at ourselves first. Where could I improve? Where could I have maybe had better communication? Where could I have better set expectations? Where could I have practiced better, project management? Where could I have set better guidelines around, what outcomes we're supposed to look like, these sorts of things. Like, we look at ourselves first before we go blaming other people in the organization for the results that we're not getting, right? So for me, one of my leadership principles is essentially we pass on the praise, but we accept the reprimand. So when the job is well done, we pass that on to our team members. They did an amazing job. They did amazing work. It's the foot soldiers on the front lines. But when something goes wrong, we stand out in front of the team in our different departments, or myself as a CEO, and say like, okay, I made a mistake, and we might have to own it up to the customer, own up to it on social media, whatever it might be. But hey, I made a mistake. I own that, and we're going to do better going forward from here. So pass on the praise, but accept the reprimand. Probably them, but definitely me. And I feel like this allows us to continue to optimize ourselves over and over again, because, the goal is to be just slightly better tomorrow than we were today. And if we compound that over time, we're an entirely different organization a year from now, 10 years from now. Just some thoughts.
I love that. That's some great words to live by there. So tell me what family means to you.
Ooh, yeah, so, my fiance and I, which is the woman who ripped up the pictures that I told you about earlier, we eventually get back together. And now we've been together for this year makes 20 years. And interestingly, a couple of years ago, she proposed to me. So when we first started dating, she was like the anti-marriage. She's like, I don't really care about marriage. It's not important to me. And I had initially thought like, I want to get married. But over time, I just kind of was like, well, I guess that's really not that important to me either. But a couple of years ago, she proposed to me on a beach in Hawaii where we had our first kiss a long time ago. So for me, family is her and I. Oftentimes I can treat my team like family, but I also like to remind my team that we're not family. That in other words, we are together by choice, not by some, unspoken commitment. Like, so every day we choose each other, and every day we can choose again, because I don't want to build a family business. I want to build an enterprise business. So oftentimes it can feel like family, but often what I identify as family is my fiance and I outside of work. So if I'm not working on being a better leader, then usually during my leisure time, that's when I'm going to spend time with her, walking the dogs in the evening, having dinner together, maybe watching a show, playing a board game. We do date night a couple of times a week. So we have date day, usually on Sundays. That's all day that we spend together. And then date night once a week, where, we turn off all the distractions. We have dinner. We talk about things that are important to us, things that are going on. We catch up on each other's lives. And, it's said that that the person we marry is not the person we divorce. And that's oftentimes because we grow apart along the way. And we found ourselves there several times. I get caught up in work. She gets caught up in her life. And we found ourselves maybe not knowing each other, sitting across the table, but feeling miles apart. And so we've made a conscious effort over the last few years to make sure that we stay connected. We continue to learn about each other. We have some board games that we play. We have a date night game that we play. It's every month they send you a new challenge. It's called Date Night Challenge or something like that. And it's every month they send you a new challenge, and we pick up these challenges and do them. And there's also a list of questions that we found in a book once that we'll periodically ask each other, so that we're constantly learning about where each other is at today, not where we were, not deluding ourselves into thinking that we're in the same relationship that we were in a year ago. If that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. You've got to evolve. You grow together or you grow apart. And what's health look like for you? Whether that be mental health, physical health, nutrition, how's health look?
I categorize health under my business, interestingly. So if you don't mind, I'll take a step back and explain. So through the lens of axiology, right, we can see that every human being is driven by an unconscious set of values. And these values will govern every aspect of our life. It's how we filter the world around us. We literally skew our experience of the world through the lens of our values. And our values will also dictate how we spend our resources, primary resources being time, energy, and money. And however we invest our resources will also ultimately become our destiny. So this is knowledge that I've had for a while in trying to understand human psychology and behavior. So back during the pandemic, Tiani and I, we were locked in our house. Tiani's my other half. We were locked in the house for 70 plus days. And one day I step on the scale and I look down and I ask, did I eat a second grader? What happened during these 70 days? I'm like, I'm carrying around a small child. And so that's this moment where I look down the scale and I realize I have not had a value on my health. Like I have not prioritized that, right? Because what we value, we prioritize. I have not prioritized that. I know that I can say that I want to be healthy, but the scale is literally telling me that that is not something that I value. So when we don't value something, we need external motivation in order to accomplish it. When we do value something, we have internal inspiration from the spirit within. We're drawn from the spirit within to accomplish it. So looking down at that scale, I instantly knew, okay, I need some external motivation until I can rewire my values. I'm going to need somebody else to hold me accountable to this. So I hired a trainer within about a week or so of that experience. I hired a trainer and we started working out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. Hit the gym. And I know that external motivation is temporary. Like it will eventually wear off if I don't find a way to align this with my values. So now I'd come home from the gym, I would ask myself, well, so how is working out a benefit to the things I value most? I know my number one value, the thing I spend my most time, energy, and money on is my business. So I'd ask myself, well, how is this making me a better leader? How is this making me, a better decision maker, a better operator? And I would literally go online and Google as well, like what are all the connections? And I would just find these reasons over and over again. I noticed myself having better focus, better attention, better decision making, better cognitive function, better memory, sleep better, wake up better, all these different things. And over time, after about 6 months or so with a trainer, I let go of the trainer, went from working out 3 days a week to 6 days a week. And since then have been able to maintain that health is a priority for me. However, for me, it lands under the umbrella of business. It's essential to me being able to perform at my highest capacity in my business because as entrepreneurs, we're mental athletes and there is a direct correlation between physiological function, the function of the body, and brain health. And so as a mental athlete, I want to support my brain, which also means as a direct byproduct supporting my body. So I work out 4 to 6 days a week, depending on the week. Sometimes things get hectic. I'm also taking peptides right now. I take my blood sample every 90 days. I meet with a doctor. We go through my blood work. We create supplementation based on that. Take a few peptides to increase performance. I just recently started. I'm 42 years old. I just recently started, literally 2 weeks ago, started TRT. We did all the natural stuff to try to bring that up, and we only got it to about a 600. So we started TRT 2 weeks ago. And we'll see where it goes from there. But yes, it's health is a daily practice for me.
I think that's what will allow you to be healthy for another 50 plus years. Forget the longevity, allow you to be healthy until you die. That's what's important to me, health span. And what do you like to do for fun? Although it sounds like a lot of what you do, you enjoy.
Yeah, for fun, that's an interesting question. I get asked that question a lot. And I tell people like, well, my work is fun. Like I love doing what I do. And sometimes people will say to me like, oh, you need more balance. But well, like, so are you suggesting that I do less of the thing that I love doing? Because like this is what I love doing, Now, that said, I also have another half and she insists on, let we unplug occasionally. So oftentimes we're from Hawaii. So oftentimes a couple of times a year, we find ourselves in Hawaii. Love sitting at the beach, love unwinding. I love some good warm weather and some sunshine. Love jumping in the ocean, jumping on a surfboard, hanging out on the water. And being with our family. I mean, our family's out there, so when we're there, we get to spend quite a bit of time with family. So we spend about a month and a half every year, in Hawaii. And I would say like, that's what I do for fun.
It's funny. You went from, Hawaii to Vegas. You couldn't get much further from the water.
Yes. And now moving to Texas. Yes. Yeah. Apparently we like being landlocked.
Yeah.
But growing up in Hawaii, people love it as a vacation spot. But I think when we grow up around something, it's easy to, maybe take it for granted, or it's just not something that's new to me. Like I love to go to a big city like New York. Last year we were in London for 5 days, and then we did a 14-day cruise all through like Ireland, Scotland, Norway, France, the UK. And that was like, I love seeing like big city. We were in Amsterdam. Like I love the big city, the hustle and bustle. Whereas I grew up in an environment where it's very relaxed and slow paced. And so when I find myself in those environments, it just feels a little more complacent for me than I would like. It's less stimulating, less different. Go ahead.
Yeah. And, with my next question is, what does a balanced life look for you? I think you sort of really described that. But, for me, what is that sort of, if you were going to really just summarize it for you, what makes a balanced life?
Yeah, that's a really great question that people ask often, right? Like, what does balance mean to us? And I think I have a couple of perspectives on this. One, oftentimes when we think of balance, what we think of is like kind of a scale. Like we have equal parts on each portion of the scale, kind of a thing, But I feel like that means that quite literally, if I'm balancing a scale, I'm taking from one side to give to another. I used to read Jeff Bezos's letters to his shareholders every year, and I think this came from his letter to his shareholders. It might have been something that was publicly said, but he said he likes to think of balance more as a circle, that both parts feed each other. Like that what we do for work feeds what we do at home, and what we do at home feeds what we do for work. It is kind of the concept that I walked away with. And for me, through my lens of study, there's axiology. So, I have a set of values. We know that typically a person is only going to make manifest in their life the top 3 to 5 things that they value. My top 3 values are business, learning, and leisure. So if I'm not working on my business, I'm typically going to be learning something. In my mornings, I'll sit and listen to a podcast or watch some YouTube videos on a particular topic that I'm working on, or read a book. And then if I'm not doing one of those 2 things, I'm not working the business, I'm not learning, that's my leisure time. That's the time that I spend with Tiani walking the dogs in the evening, or having dinner, or, putting on a show, or playing some board games, or going on a trip for, a couple of months out of the year. So I look at it as like every person is perfectly balanced across their set of values. Oftentimes, though, we feel imbalanced because what happens from a psychological perspective is that rather than honoring our values, which our values are demonstrated in our life, like if we look at our actions, it becomes clear what our values are. What we say and what we do are oftentimes in conflict. But if we were to just look at how somebody spends their time, energy, and money, we will identify their values. Well, oftentimes we can feel like we're out of balance or doing life wrong because we also tend to inject the values of our father, brother, sister, teacher, preacher, institution, the media, there's all these outside voices that oftentimes tell us who we ought to be, or who we need to be, or who we're supposed to be in order to be quote unquote successful. And as a result of that, sometimes we can end up, judging ourselves for who we're not rather than loving ourselves for who we are. And I have a mentor who likes to say that when the voices on the inside are clearer and louder than the voices on the outside, then we become a master of our life. And so for me, balance is being perfectly balanced across my values and knowing what my values are. I think that fits well inside of Jeff Bezos's model of something that is circular, that like when I'm taking that time off from work in the evenings, that's where I recharge, refill my cup, so the next day I can pour back into my business. And by having a place for me to exercise my inspiration in life, that I draw from that inspiration to be more effective in my home life as well. And therefore there's a circle versus a scale.
And what is one piece of advice you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Wow. Likely the most beneficial thing that I've uncovered over my years as an entrepreneur. I often go back to this James Michner quote. The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body. He hardly knows which is which. And in other words, that's a purpose-driven life. And when we live by our highest values, from a teleological perspective, when we live by our highest values, we're living by purpose. And I would suggest to an entrepreneur that you know what your values are, because we live in such a loud, noisy world that's constantly inundating us with messages about who we're supposed to be or need to be or have to be. but to be ruthlessly committed to the execution of our values, kind in the way that we adhere to them, meaning kind to others and kind to ourselves in the way that we adhere to those values. Do that, and life becomes purposeful and meaningful.
Wow. Thank you. I think you're must be fun to come to your retreats and learn with you. So how can people find you, and how can people jump in and join your program?
Well, thank you for asking. We do have a self-assessment that's available at thepowercode.com. The self-assessment is about assessing what are your values. So the power, when our goals and our values are in line, we have inspiration, certainty, clarity, confidence, poise, precision, power. When our goals and our values are out of line, we experience procrastination, hesitation, frustration, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, generally the things that get in the way of us achieving our goals. When our goals and our values are aligned, we call that the power code, and we offer a free assessment at thepowercode.com. Somebody can download. It's 10 simple questions, but it's really designed to help you get clear about what your life currently demonstrates is your true set of values, so that you can build a life and work around your values and live a purpose-driven life. Thepowercode.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today. I've loved hearing your words of wisdom.
Well, thank you for having me again, Leo. I appreciate the time being here.
And thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and leave a review. Thank you.